One broken shoe changed his entire destiny. While walking, the boss's shoe breaks. A running stranger passes by, and the boss stops him. The man says, "I'm getting late for my interview." The boss says, "Please, can you bring me a new pair of shoes from somewhere? Here's the money. Size 38. The man takes the money and runs off. Meanwhile, the secretary is doing her makeup. The job candidates start arriving. The secretary calls the boss. "Ma'am, when will you arrive for the interviews?" The candidates are already here. The boss replies, "I'm in a bit of trouble. Just pick any capable candidate yourself." The secretary hangs up the call. Just then, another candidate arrives. The secretary smiles and walks up to him. "When did you come back from abroad?" she asks. The candidate says, "I'm happy to see you." The secretary says, "Are you here for the interview?" The candidate smiles and says, "Yes." The secretary says, "Please wait inside." The other candidates complain, "Miss, we came first." The secretary says, "If you have a problem, you may leave." The candidate smiles and asks, "What's your position here?" The secretary says, "I'm the boss's assistant." Meanwhile, at the shoe store, the man says, "I need a size 38 shoe." The shopkeeper says, "All right." The man checks his watch nervously. The shopkeeper says, "This one's $50. The man replies, No, I need something for $20. He takes out a few coins from his pocket. "Don't you have any discount shoes? My wife is upset with me." The shopkeeper asks, "How much money do you have in total?" The man says, $23. The shopkeeper takes the money, packs a pair of shoes, and says, "Thank you. Please come again." The man grabs the shoes quickly. "Sure, thanks," and runs away. Back at the office, the candidate says, "I really need this job. Please help me." The secretary says, "Will you give me your file?" The candidate hands her the file. The secretary says, "Your degree is in business administration, but we need an economist." The candidate replies, "This position is perfect for me. I'm great with numbers." The secretary says, "All right, I'll hire you." Wait a moment. She walks out, collects the other candidates' files, and says, "You can all leave. We'll call you later." Back in the office, the secretary tells the candidate, "Don't disappoint me now." The candidate asks, "How much is the salary?" The secretary says, "It's quite good." The candidate asks, "But what will be my job?" The secretary explains, "We have a project that aims to boost sales with partner companies." Meanwhile, the man returns with the shoes. The boss says, "Thank you so much. Can I help you with something in return?" The man replies, "Just a cup of coffee would be enough, but I have to go now." The boss says, "How will I find you again?" The man says, "If God wills, we'll meet again," and runs off. He arrives at the office. "Good morning. I'm here for the job interview." The secretary says, "You're late." He replies, "Ma'am, I can explain." The secretary says, "No need." He gives her his file and leaves. Just then, the boss enters and sees the man walking away. The secretary comes out and says, "He was the best candidate." The boss asks, "That man who just left, what did he want?" The secretary says, "He came for a job." The boss asks, "Did he leave his file?" The secretary says, "Yes." The boss says, "Then contact him and offer him the job." The secretary says, "But there's no vacancy left." The boss replies, "I don't care." The boss continues, "If he's really that good, tell him to analyze the last 3 running projects and tell me which ones should continue and which shouldn't. Include indicators like TIR and VAN." The candidate looks shocked as if it's something out of reach, but says, "All right." The secretary calls the man, "Sir, can you come to the company? There's a job opportunity for you." Later, the boss tells the new manager, "This is an important project. It will help us collaborate with major companies. Don't disappoint me." The manager says, "You won't have any complaints." The man arrives at the office. The boss says, "The next office is yours." He says, "Besides my economics degree, I also have a diploma in project management." The secretary says, "There's no vacancy for a manager." The man says, "Then why did you call me here?" The secretary replies, "Because there's a janitor's position available." The man says, "But I applied for the manager's post." The secretary says, "If you want this job, take it." The man sighs. "All right." The secretary says, "Your uniform is downstairs. Keep the place clean." Later, the janitor enters the manager's office. "I'm here to clean," he says. Seeing the manager looking stressed, he says, "VAN means value of actual net." The manager gets angry. "Did I ask for your help? Just do your job," and kicks him out. The janitor sees the boss. "I'm happy to see the lady with heels again. I never thought we'd meet." The boss smiles. "Neither did I. You finally got a job." The janitor says, "This isn't the job I wanted." The boss asks, "Then what job did you want?" Before he can answer, the secretary interrupts. "Ma'am, there's an urgent call for you." The boss hands him some money and says, "I know those shoes didn't cost $20. You forgot to remove the price tag." The janitor says, "That money isn't even enough for a cup of coffee." The boss smiles. "I'll think about it later." Later, the boss checks on the manager. "How long will it take?" The manager says, "It's in progress." The boss says, "Finish it by noon." The manager nods. After she leaves, he uses ChatGPT to try and complete the project. At 5 p.m., he takes the file to the boss. "Here's the project progress report." The boss asks, "Are you leaving?" "Yes, I have some personal work, and it's already 5. The boss says, "All right, but I'll be expecting you tomorrow." The company's co-owner is coming for the presentation. After he leaves, the secretary says, "Everything all right?" The manager says, "Perfect." She smiles. "Shall we go for coffee?" He says, "Sure, just like old times." She laughs. "Yes, now that we're both colleagues." She glances at the file and says, "This is all useless. It's worthless," and throws it down. The janitor picks up the papers and sits down. "Tell me, what's wrong?" The boss says, "Even if I tell you, you can't help." The janitor says, "Maybe you forgot, but I've helped you before." The boss says, "I'm trying to prepare an analysis report for a project, but it's all wrong." The janitor says, may I take a look? The boss says, sure. After reviewing the documents, he asks, what outcome do you want from this project? The boss says, I want this deal finalized. If it fails, we'll lose everything. My partner is coming tomorrow and nothing is ready. Only a miracle can save us. The janitor smiles. Of course, just wear nice heels tomorrow. The boss laughs, I will, and leaves. After she leaves, the janitor stays behind, takes the project files, and starts working on the manager's laptop. The next morning, the manager finds the janitor asleep in his office. What are you doing here? Who gave you permission? The janitor says, I was just trying to help. The manager says, your job is cleaning. Stick to that. The janitor picks up his papers and walks away. The secretary stops him. Next time, your rude behavior won't be tolerated. You'll be fired. The janitor says, I don't care. Go ahead, and leaves. The boss arrives. Your suggestions are all wrong. The manager says, I'll fix everything. The boss says, finish it by noon. If there's a single mistake, you're fired. The secretary says, you said you could handle everything. The manager replies, yes, but your boss is impossible to please. She says, do your job properly or we'll both be out. The manager, biting his nails nervously, sees the janitor again. You understand projects, right? The janitor says, yes. The manager pleads, help me. I'll pay you whatever you want. The janitor says, you've put the company at risk. Not everything can be solved with money. The manager says, I just need your technical help. The janitor says, I can't. I'm busy cleaning. The manager says, I'll do your cleaning for you if you help me. The janitor smiles. I'd like to see that, but no thanks. You need to take responsibility for your own mistakes. I'm going to clean the boss's office. The company's co-owner arrives. Good morning. The secretary greets him. We've been expecting you, sir. Please come in. She takes him to the boss's office. He shakes hands with the boss. I hope you're well. I'm leaving the country for a few days, but before that, I wanted to review the proposal personally. I'm sure it's ready. The boss says, please call the manager. The secretary calls the manager, who looks terrified. He takes the file and enters the boss's office. The boss hands the file to the co-owner. He says, may I take a look? The boss says, I'm sorry, but the project still needs some revisions. The co-owner says, you didn't call me here to hear that. If we start like this, we won't achieve anything. The manager tries to explain, sir, what we need to do is increase imports of these products and stop exports to gain long-term profit. The co-owner says, I already know that. Can you explain how we'll achieve it? As they speak, the janitor walks in and says, this is the completed project. The boss says, I'm sorry, sir, but the plan is now ready. The co-owner reviews it for a while. This looks interesting, he says, but what's the TIR? Which scenario are we working with? The manager turns pale. Sir, our TIR is approximately, the boss interrupts. He didn't make this project. The janitor did. The co-owner says, can you explain this, young man? The janitor says, yes, sir. The van is designed at $28,450 with a TIR of about 23.4%. If we optimize logistics, it can reach up to 30%. The co-owner asks, if the discount rate changes by 10%, what's the sensitivity? The janitor says, I've calculated for 10%, 12%, and 15%. At 14.3%, the project remains profitable, yielding around $3,200. I modeled it all in Excel to test critical scenarios. The co-owner says, I don't understand how a janitor knows this much about economics. The janitor replies, I graduated from Oxford University with a degree in economics, but until life gives me a better chance, I work here as a janitor. The co-owner says, we'll proceed with the project on one condition, he'll be in charge. The boss says, don't worry, sir, that's how it will be. The co-owner says, good, then it's a deal. He makes a quick call. All right, I'm on my way. See you soon, and leaves. The boss turns to the manager. You're fired. The manager leaves silently. The secretary's about to leave too, but the boss stops her. The secretary tries to explain, but the boss interrupts. You can leave as well. You knew he wasn't capable. Get out. The secretary leaves. The boss turns to the janitor. Why didn't you tell me you were an economist? The janitor smiles. You never asked. The boss says, anyway, thank you for helping me. But how did you do all this? The janitor says, I stayed all night in the office working on it. The boss smiles. How can I repay you? The janitor replies, maybe over a cup of coffee. The boss laughs. I have a better idea